All right. Well, welcome to Kick Unhealthy Relationships to the Curb. I'm actually in charge this time. Normally Steve doesn't let me be in charge. So,
That's not true. You're in charge. You just don't know it.
well, we could well, this is true, but I mean, we have a pretty equal relationship. So, yeah, I'm giving you a hard time, but we're here today with Steve, of course, and Colleen Merlo, who is the director of Violence Against Domestic Violence. So, we wanted to bring her on today because there is such big issues people are having, being trapped in isolation, quarantine, whatever you want to call it, with people that are abusive. And so I'm sure that Colleen's getting a lot of insight. I mean, I know for me, business has never been busier. So there's a lot of people reaching out for support, and I can only imagine what you're dealing with right now. So you mind telling us maybe a little bit about yourself and what you've been seeing lately?
Sure. So thank you, Stephanie and Steve, for having me on to talk about this really important topic. I am the executive director of LI Against Domestic Violence, and we provide comprehensive services. I'm getting a lot of feedback. Is that a problem on your end?
That was my phone.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. No, that's
Yes.
okay. I thought it was me. All right. Sorry about that. So I am the director of LI Against Domestic Violence. We provide comprehensive services for survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. So that's everything from, the first initial call to a hotline to reaching out for counseling, advocacy services. So we do support people who want to go through criminal court or family court to get orders of protection and utilize the justice system to gain protection. We do have a shelter. And we've been getting a lot of inquiries from the media and elected officials just in terms of what the numbers are looking like now. And, anytime you analyze data, you have to be careful about what you're looking at. Are you looking at the whole picture? But what I can tell you is looking at our internal numbers, looking at kind of the state hotline numbers, as well as law enforcement and the courts, things are busy. We are seeing an uptick in terms of people needing support and services right now. And we also know from, our past work with disasters, so Superstorm Sandy, that this initial period was just the tip of the iceberg. Really, when things calm down, we know that things are going to get even worse because unfortunately, as many as there are of people reaching out, we also know there are people where it's just not safe for them to even make that initial call or send us a text or a chat. And so those are the people I worry about really significantly. And hopefully we can talk a little bit about how, non-professionals can help those folks.
Now, Colleen, you've been executive director since 2014. What is some of the rewarding times during that time and most challenging things have you been faced with over the last 6 or so years?
Yeah, well, I'd say just when you thought things couldn't get any more challenging, we're here. But, one of the most rewarding things about my job is, and I've worked in the field for quite some time and in mental health previously, is that our clients really do stay in touch with us. And I think that's because we're with them during such a profound time in their life when they are either reaching out to find safety for the first time or have made a transition to choose to be safer in a relationship. And so we get to hear the success stories. We do stay in touch with our clients. And, one thing, that, even when I tell the story to this day, it gives me chills, is we had a client who was in our shelter. She had two kids who were in junior high and high school at the time. And I remember one of the struggles that she faced most was that she didn't see a future for her kids. She didn't know how she was going to pick up the pieces of, an abusive marriage, abuse that the kids were exposed to and really give them success. And that's what she felt most guilty about. And 2 years ago, she actually called me. Her son was getting into medical school. And, for me, that's just, there is life after. And I think that's the best part of my job, is that I get to see folks where they really are at a time where they're struggling and don't see that hope within themselves. Because the truth of the matter is we can't impart hope on someone. All we can do is support them and remind them how strong they really are. And I think that's the best part, is seeing people who are just so strong in the face of such obstacles. And I think that the challenge is sometimes, the stories that we hear are just so devastating, and remaining hopeful. But then we have those stories, and that's how we can really do that and remain hopeful and know that we're making a difference.
Wow.
Now, Steve, you might not know this, but when I was in my abusive marriage, I actually had reached out to Long Island Against Domestic Violence because I was aware of them because I've been a crisis counselor previously. And actually, Colleen, we probably worked together at the same time at the hotline, which is interesting. But I had reached out to Long Island Against Domestic Violence because I was trying to figure things out. And I really didn't know what direction to turn to. So I had reached out, and I think I called their hotline. They put me in touch with a lawyer, and I was able to ask questions. And that was really helpful to kind of be like, I'm not crazy. Like, this is really not great behavior. And I'll never forget, I couldn't remember her name, but I could probably like point at her if I saw her. This like very thin, spunky, like woman was in charge of me, like my case. She helped me go to the, she came in actually, I think, to the precinct and helped start writing things down because I didn't even know how to put it into words. And then she was my court advocate. So she went with me and actually helped me write an order of protection. And she was the first person ever to tell me that being strangled was worse than getting beat up. And anyone who's not in an abusive relationship would be like, duh, that's pretty terrible. But when you're in it, when you're full-fledged in it, I was still thinking like, well, this is really bad. But I knew that there was emotional stuff going on. But I wasn't even I was like, well, it's not that bad. He just strangled me. He just spit on me. He just doesn't let me sleep. He tries to, financially manipulate, like all of these things that I knew were not good with my background and everything that I knew. But it was the first time ever that I had someone say to me, like, she looked at me like her mouth dropped, like, this is terrible that he strangled you. It's like, we need to put this in the report. And I was like, huh. And thank goodness, because obviously now strangulation is way different, is looked at way different, I think, than what it was, 8 years ago, whatever it was. But you need that type of support when you're in it because you're not realizing how far it's gone while you're in it. You're just in survival mode.
And that's certainly a tactic that abusers use, is to desensitize survivors or victims. We call people survivors, but that's what abusers do. They desensitize victims to the abuse, right? So it starts out small and they make an excuse and they blame the victim, and the victim takes that on. And then all of a sudden you're at the point where you are being strangled and you're like, oh, it's not that bad. And that's how abusers maintain that power. And sometimes it takes, a friend or a family member pointing out that this is not a healthy or safe relationship, or an advocate. We go through a scale sometimes with individuals, and it's a lethality scale. And sometimes people score really high, and seeing that number in black and white does so much to help someone realize that this really is serious and this really is dangerous. We can say, this is not safe. Someone put their hands around your neck, but to see it on paper, black and white, and say, this is your score, lethality. Like, this could result in your death if you don't take action to become safer.
Right. This is Kick Unhealthy Relationships to the Curb. That's Stephanie McPhail. I'm Steve Vaccaro. That's our guest, Collen Merlo, who is the Executive Director of Long Island Against Domestic Violence since 2014. We're here every Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 7 to 7:30. Now, Collen, do you think that during this time of the pandemic and people being quarantined in here, what advice would you give? Stephanie and I have been dealing with this over the last couple of weeks. What advice would you give people that are in a abusive relationship, or it's becoming increasingly toxic due to the stresses of life, perhaps finances and being quarantined, losing job and not having money for bills and things? What advice would you give in the here and now?
Well, I think there's two separate people that we're talking to. There are those individuals who are in unhealthy relationships, and the stress of what is going on is making it feel more toxic and, more combative. And then there's individuals who are in what we define as a domestic violence situation. So for the people that are in a domestic violence situation where the relationship isn't just unhealthy and combative, it is based on power and control, where one person is exerting that power and control over another person. These times, are not causing someone to be abusive, but they can exacerbate and escalate the abuse. And for those individuals, what I would say is do whatever you need to stay safe in the moment. And for every single person, that is very different. So it may mean leaving the relationship and reaching out and calling 911 if you're in immediate danger always. It might mean calling a hotline and saying, I can't stay here any longer. It's not safe. I need shelter, and coming into shelter. It may mean, doing whatever you need to do to get through the day in a safe way as possible. So, our conversations with survivors have changed drastically over the last few weeks. Safety planning has changed drastically. So, it used to be, if the abuse escalates and it's safe for you to get out, run to your neighbor's house. Well, people don't want to do that anymore because they're afraid of exposing or being exposed to the virus. And so safety planning now with survivors is, what room in the house are you least likely to get hurt in if it turns physical? So, those are difficult conversations to have, but don't be in the kitchen, right? There's lots of hard surfaces and there's access to knives and other sharp things. So that's the conversation. I think mostly what I want people to know is that domestic violence services are operational. So if someone is choosing to seek help, we are here. All of our services are operating. We're operating remotely, but we can help people and, get people into the support and services that they need. But I really think for most people, we're not here to tell you what to do. We're here to work through all of your options with you and figure out what's best for you. And that's different for every single person.
Now, Colleen, I asked this question to Stephanie a lot. Why is it so hard for someone to leave a domestically violent situation, an abusive relationship? How would you explain that to people that may be in it or just hearing this, kind of information for the first time?
Well, I'm just thinking about the story that Stephanie said. And probably people who hear that for the first time from a survivor, he did what to you? How did you stay? Why would you stay? And I can understand that from the perspective, right? Why would anyone stay in that type of a situation?
It was on our wedding night. It was on our wedding night too. That was the first time that ever happened. And it was one of those things of like, I just married this man. Like, what do I do? So and then of course it progresses from there. But yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But again, it doesn't start off that way. So there's multiple layers why someone stays, but oftentimes it's because the person really believes the power and control that the abuser has, they're going to make good on. So it's threats. You'll never see your kids again. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill your parents. Or, if you do this, X, Y, and Z. And the abuser has made, threats and they've come true in the past, right? So if you try to leave now, I'm going to do this. And so the fear, it's a matter of fear. Abusers are really good at exerting fear, and the other piece of it, is the truth of the matter is there is a degree where the abuser promises that things can change. And because of human nature, we want people to be the best that they are. And we remember, that person that we fell in love with or was so kind to us in the beginning of the relationship. And abusers remind victims of that good time. And I think that survivors really want to believe the best in people. And they believe that the abuser, this one time, I just have to give, him or her one more chance and things will get better. And then the other piece of it is that abusers are really good at manipulating and making a survivor feel as though it is their fault. And so therefore they better stick around and fix the situation.
Right. Now you're a professional, a clinician. So if there was a friend out there that, knows of a domestic violent situation, abusive situation, what would you recommend that friend to begin the trust and establish rapport with a friend or a family member so that person can look at things differently and rationally?
So I would say now more than ever, friends are going to be vital lifelines. In the past, survivors went to work or an abuser went to work and there was some respite time where the person could get relief or someone was checking up on them, right? I've had some of our, or the people that we work with say, you know, I loved going to work because I knew it was my safety net. It was a place for me to escape. I also know that if I didn't show up on Monday morning, my boss was going to call and check on me. And so, you know, my husband wouldn't do X, Y, and Z because he knew someone would be checking up, and that safety net isn't there anymore. So now is the time for friends and family members to be even more involved. And that doesn't mean calling and saying, hey, is so and so being abusive? It's just making sure those lines of communication stay open, calling, texting, just calling to say hi, reminding the person that you are there for them if they need you, to call and text. And I think just having the conversation and being concrete. Sometimes, you know, now might not be the time to say, hey, I think you're in an abusive relationship. But if that conversation has already started and the person knows that you are aware of some of the difficulty going on at home, to just call them and say, you know, I want you to know that I'm still here for you. You can call or text me at any time. As a matter of fact, why don't we just check in with one another once a day? And if I don't hear from you, I'm going to be concerned and do something to outreach further. You know, some people have set up code words with family members and friends to say, you know, if I call you and I tell you that I have a really bad toothache today, or that, you know, I wasn't able to order oranges at the grocery store, you're going to know that things have escalated to the point where I need you to call 911 for me.
Interesting. So that's very important to maintain that connection with that trusted person. And because it could become even more volatile if that abuser kind of finds out what's going on. So you really want to be discreet and creative about it.
Yeah, you have to be discreet, you know, and make sure that it's safe, you know, even calling and saying, is it safe for you to talk to me right now? And checking in.
Now, I see that you've been the executive director of the Mental Health Association in Suffolk County prior to that position. Does your experience and knowledge in that position has that helped you in your current position and how you empower, you know, survivors or your staff?
Definitely. I mean, that was a wonderful position. And I think that the thing that carries through all of these stories is the trauma, right? So people who've been through the mental health system are started with trauma history, and, you know, 9 out of 10 of times. So that trauma piece is prevalent in working with all folks. And that's the piece that I think we need to focus on, is how can we help people and support people to heal from trauma, whether it started very early in childhood or whether it started, you know, in high school with one abusive relationship. Really helping people to recover from those traumatic experiences so that they can go on and live healthy and happy, and as they define it, successful lives.
Right. This is Kicking Healthy Relationships to the Curb. That's Stephanie McPhail. I'm Steve Vaccaro here every Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 7 to 7:30. And we have the privilege of getting to know Collen Merlo, who is the executive director of Long Island Against Domestic Violence, and she's been doing that for several years now, almost out of time. But what advice would you give if you had to pick one thing out to reach out to potential survivors or repeat survivors at this point?
Just again, that you know what's best for you, do what you need to be safe right now. You know, we know that this pandemic will pass. We don't know when, but, you know, domestic violence will always be, unfortunately, part of people's lives. So if you want help, support is absolutely here for you now. And you can call our hotline, reach out for help. And if you're not local to Long Island and you need to, there's domestic violence agencies across the nation that are open, available, here to support you in whatever way that we can. And just to stay safe and know, you know what's best for you. You know, no one else can tell you what to do. You have to do what is best for you and your situation.
That's great. And I must say one thing before we go. I know you went to Stony Brook, so I went to Stony Brook too. So we share that. So
Alumni.
I had to give a little shout out to that. But more importantly, you were in the top 50 women in business in 2019. That's pretty cool. That might be for another show, but that's great. That's a great honor.
It's a wonderful honor. And it's wonderful to recognize that not-for-profits are businesses, right? Because so often people say, well, it's a not-for-profit that you're running, but everything that goes into running a successful business, you need for a not-for-profit as well. So it was a great honor.
Wow,
And I was actually there. That's actually how I even saw Colleen, accept her award. And I was like, why aren't I talking to her? Like as soon as I left the relationship, I'm like, I know I need to give back, and I want to give something back to Long Island Against Domestic Violence because it was so helpful for me. And then I saw that and I was like, okay, so we need to talk. And so that's kind of how that started.
Wow. And Stephanie, you didn't invite me? I thought we had a healthy relationship to go to this.
Well, back then it was actually kind of cool because I was invited as a special guest from, what is her name? This Lisa Von something. She was in charge of Crest Hollow, I think is where it was at. But she said she had been in her own toxic relationship when she was younger. So she always wanted to support women who were helping educate other women with domestic violence and unhealthy relationships. So she had heard about me and she said, why don't you come as a special guest? I sat at our table and everything else. So it's kind of a cool experience to be there with all these really empowered, strong women. Like, I'm like, a jam. Like, I love that stuff.
Wow, that is great. Colleen, how can people get a hold of you one more time in case they just tuned in right now?
Sure. So our hotline number is 631-666-8833. And our website is liadv.org.
Well, thank you so very much. You just kind of, reinforced what we've been talking along all the time, but having someone in your stature talk about that is reassuring to so many people.
Thank you for having me on and giving me the opportunity. I hope that it's helpful to your listeners.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Colleen. And we'll definitely be in touch again because there's definitely some more stuff that we need to help each other out with. So thank you again so much, and we'll be in touch soon.
Thank you.
All right, good night. Stay well.
Have a great night, everybody.